finally, a game where it's fitting to enjoy some freshly brewed tea. How long do I need to actually keep this tea in my hand for whilst we're playing this? How long? Hi everyone, welcome to the Broken Meeple, and today we're looking at what has been a fairly hot recent Euro game to come out of Kickstarter and Tasty Minstrel Games, which is Yokohama, however you want to pronounce it. Yokohama is a recent Kickstarter by Tasty Minstrel Games that's come out in both a retail and a deluxe version. I will comment on the differences between the two, but note that my review copy was a retail version. However, I have played both, so I can comment on those. Yokohama is essentially a Euro game which is not so much, it's semi-worker placement, but it has a few mechanics similar to Istanbul, where you have a person that you're moving around a set of tiles that are all different locations, and depending on how many assistants that you have with you, they enable you to do actions at various levels of power, and basically it's a bit of a point salad. You're able to gather resources from here, fulfill orders over there, convert this into that there. You know, there's a lot of different options that you can go for and many ways to get points. So it's a typical Euro style game. Get points in one of 100 ways and winner is the one with the most. Let me give you an overview of just what exactly you're doing in this game and then we'll get back to my thoughts. Once a humble fishing village at the beginning of the Meiji era, Yokohama is becoming one of the leading harbour cities of Japan. At the centre of this development are the merchants of Yokohama, such as yourself, vying to gain fame by fulfilling export orders, learning foreign technology, and building shops and trading houses to develop the city. In Yokohama, you are placing your president and assistant pawns on various different location tiles which are randomly set up when the game begins in order to generate victory points. These victory points can be generated in a myriad of ways. You may gain technology cards which grant you special abilities and also points. You may convert resources into faith at the church via donations for points. You may fulfill import orders for points. You may export resources for points. You may simply just waltz around certain location tiles gathering as much of one particular resource such as fish, tea and brick as you like, and then converting those into points. There's all sorts of ways that you can get points in this game, and it is very much a point salad in that respect. The best way I would like to describe Yokohama is Istanbul on steroids. If you are used to the mechanics of Istanbul, then you will have a decent idea of how this game runs. You are essentially moving from location to location, dragging your assistants along with you. Your president is the one that is doing the actions, but your assistants dictate how powerful the action is. And it will mean a lot of difference in order to go from, say, a level 1 power to a level 5 power. As you go through, you will be building buildings on location tiles, you'll be buying technology, fulfilling orders and meeting objective cards and all sorts in order to gain the most points by the end of the game. There are many ways that the game end can be triggered, usually by decks running out or certain boards filling up. Of course, you need to keep an eye on what the other players are doing because their presidents can block your movement and hamper your ability to generate points. At the end of the day, it's a bit of a point salad. You pick a path that you want to go for and you can generate victory points along that path. At the end of the game, when one of the end game conditions is met, the winner is, no surprise, the one with the most victory points. Now, Yokohama was a bit of an interesting one for me because, as I said, this is Istanbul on steroids. That is the best way I can describe it. With Istanbul, you had the guy moving around, the discs moving around the locations, and your assistants came with you, and you had to dictate your movement based on where those assistants were. This is similar, except your president is the one doing the actions, and the assistants dictate how good the action is. but the assistants also dictate where your president can move, so you need to keep them close. So it's a tweak on the Istanbul movement mechanic, but it works quite well here. I like the amount of variety this game has. It is a point salad through and through, and there are quite a lot of ways to get points. I wouldn't say that it's overly thematic though. I mean, I certainly don't think the theme comes out very strongly in this game. But if you like point salads, particularly if you were a big fan of the old Stefan Feld stuff, then, well, you'll get a good kick out of this one. And I do like a bit of variety in my game. Again, with the variety thing, you also have variable setup, which is another great thing. The tiles, the locations you have, they're dictated by player count, but they are randomized entirely as to where they go. So you might have one game where a lot of certain things are grouped up next to each other and that changes the way the game feels. Another time they might be completely spread out at different ends and suddenly that makes life harder for one thing but easier for another. So you do get a lot of good replay value out of the game. However, it's not perfect, and for me it's okay. It's hard to put myself exactly with this one. Firstly, I will mention the difference between retail and deluxe. In the Kickstarter, I believe there was only a $10 difference, 15 max, with the retail version and the deluxe. I would like to see the cost pricing, like, I don't know, memo or order that goes into one of these games, because for that small amount of difference, wow, the deluxe version has a lot more than this does. This one has basic pawns and cubes. Cubes! Seriously, we're not done with cubes yet. And it has cardboard tokens for the resources, it just has cardboard tokens for the buildings. You know, most stuff is on a piece of cardboard and a cube. So it still looks good, and the graphic design is the same, and you get nice location tiles, although the artwork in this game is very, very basic. So, you know, it's not groundbreaking, but it's not bad either. It's just, meh, it's there. It does what it says on the tin, really. But the deluxe version, my God, I think you get metal coins in there, you get wooden buildings to put down, your assistants are all meeples, including your president. There's a lot more in that one. And all the resources are wooden tokens as well, I forgot. I mean, there's so much more in the deluxe version compared to this that I don't get where that such small margin came from on the Kickstarter. Perhaps it was just part of a Kickstarter benefit of getting in early, but, you know, certainly if you are going to enjoy this game and you want to get one for keeps, save up and get the deluxe version, because it really is that much of a component upgrade. Now, the gameplay itself doesn't change between the two versions, so if you are really strapped for cash and you're not fussed about aesthetics, then grab the retail version and you'll be just fine. But certainly after playing the retail version, I'm like, if I had a choice, I'd get the deluxe in a heartbeat. It's just like, if the cost difference isn't that much, I would want the deluxe. But I think it's harder to get that one outside of Kickstarter, because I think you get this one mainly, and the deluxe was more for the Kickstarter backers. But yeah, it's going to make you feel a little bit sad inside when you see the difference between the two. But aesthetics don't mean everything to everyone. So how does the game feel? Well, like I said, I don't think the theme is too strong in this. There's a little bit of that historical element with, you know, the fact that you were in Yokohama, you were a merchant, and you were, you know, trading and gaining technologies from other countries like Britain and America and that. So there is that element, but when you don't feel like you're a tea grower or something. You know, you might focus on getting a ton of tea and using that to get points, but you don't necessarily feel like that's what you're doing. It's just a tile happens to give you it. Compare it to something like Le Havre, where you're using the actual buildings like the baker and everything, and it just feels a lot more thematic in those ones. Here, it's essentially another way to get points. It feels very much like a typical Euro and a giant point salad, because there's a lot of ways to score the points, and you won't necessarily know who's going to win until the end of the game, and you can get some tight scores in this, right down to the tiebreaker, which is a stupid tiebreaker. If there's a reason for why this is in the game, I want to see decent evidence for this, because I've heard theories and they just don't hold up. But the tiebreaker in this is whoever is sat closest to the first player gets the tie. So basically, if you went last, you're basically screwed on a tiebreaker. As if it wasn't already bad enough that starting late means that you have less options on your first turn. So that's a really weird tiebreaker. Why couldn't they have just said whoever has the most coins is a tiebreaker? I mean, you're supposed to be a merchant getting wealth and fame, so surely getting coins wouldn't be a bad one to go for. It's a minor nitpick, but that just sort of rubbed me the wrong way when it came up in a game. Thankfully, it turned out I was actually 1 point ahead, so we didn't need the tiebreaker, but yeah, if I'd lost based on that kind of a tiebreaker just because somebody went third and I went fourth, that just doesn't seem right. But like I say, minor nitpick. The player scaling is a little bit of an issue I have with this though. It goes from 2 to 4 players. The game scales nicely with the locations based on player count. You have a certain amount of locations and it's set up in a different way. So there's always contention for the various locations, no matter how many players you have. You know, even if it's just the two of you, you'll be fighting against each other for block movement, but only every now and again. I found that even in a 4-player game, there wasn't that off many times when I felt like my movement was blocked, and even then you could kind of see it coming. So the interaction in this game is pretty light. There's basically little to no interaction. Occasionally somebody will block your movement, but that's about it. It's no different than most typical Euros where someone takes your spot, for example. So yeah, typical Euro, not much player interaction. But player scaling. Yes, it scales well for number of locations. Boy, does this not scale well for time. Now, on the box it says 90 minutes. Possibly, with 2 players. Otherwise, that is a lie.
Objection!
You want to include setup and takedown in your time takings, whereas I do. I think that setting and taking down a game is part of the game. Therefore, it's not like right, we're going to sit down and play Yokohama. Ooh, it's so set up already, reverse waiting. No, you had to take time to set it up and teach it. Now, let's ignore teaching for now. There's a lot of rules to teach in this, so it's not the most complex game, but it's not the most streamlined one either, so there's quite a lot to teach. But yeah, 90 minutes? No. 2 players maybe, but not with any more than that. You know, the first game we played of this, we were all learning it, apart from 1 player who knew what they were doing. 4 of us, it took over 3 hours. It's a long game, and that wasn't with very much analysis paralysis. It just took forever for the in-game timers to come around. Even in lower player counts, I've noticed it just seems to outstay its welcome a bit. 2 or 3 players. I mean, I wouldn't want to play this for 90 minutes as 2 players. I certainly wouldn't want to play it with 2 hours for free, or certainly not 3 hours with 4. And because you don't really add any extra interaction and the player scaling is already good with the locations, all you're really doing when adding players is just adding more time. But I don't want to just add a player to add more time to a Euro. I want the game to be finished. And certainly, especially, even ignore 3 hours. When we had more practice, you're still talking at least 2.5 with max players. And it just outstays its welcome too quickly, because Istanbul works because that's a quick game. Even that can get a little bit samey after a while, but at least the game is relatively quick. It's done with in about an hour or so. This one takes 2, if not 3 times as long as that, and essentially it's just Istanbul with more meat on it. That's about it. You know, there's only so much you can do with that. And I just found it took a little bit too long. I had the strategy for the game, and in many games, and I kept finding that your strategy was dealt with and you weren't anywhere near finishing the game. So you kind of had to think, well, I've done all that now, so what next? I guess I'll go grab that and get some points because it's there. And by the end of the last couple of turns, you're like, well, I've already done that, and that, and that. Just to give you that trading house, it's worth 8 points, whereas that's only worth 7 or something. And that just is a big killer for me. It doesn't feel like there's much of a story arc. You know, you are just grabbing points. You don't really see anything build up in front of you. You just see a few wooden buildings on the board and a bunch of point tokens, and that's really about it. So it kind of just outstays its welcome and doesn't immerse me enough in the game. And playing it with too many players just takes too long. Now, I mean, that's bad things, but generally the game is still fun, up to a point. I would only really want to play this now with 2, maximum 3 players, and that's assuming we know what we're doing. But even then, I could always just go off and play Istanbul and get very much the same similar feeling, just not as much meat, but in a shorter space of time. Another flaw that I have with this is, one thing I like in my Euros is a sense of differentiation between the players. Like, I've done this and it's different from what this person's doing. Games like Caverna do this, where you're building your farm and your cave in front of you, and when you finish, yours is different to player B to player C, and it's still balanced point-wise. Here, the balance is okay. I think for the most part it's pretty balanced. I still argue that I think the imports and the faith tracks are a little too high in points because you can get quite a lot of those. The orders are a little bit more all over the place because you might have one that gives you like 11 points and it requires these resources, and then something gives you only 3 points but it gives you a couple of bucks, and that's for some reason requiring similar if not the same amount of resources. And it's like, to be honest, I'd rather get the victory points than just a couple of bucks, because you can always just waltz to the bank and get more money. It's not that difficult. But, you know, that's relatively, that's relative to the game itself and how many times you've played it. But generally, I think it's reasonably balanced. But differentiation is a problem, because you just don't feel different to anybody in this game. You go and do different actions, but remember what I said about you kind of run out of things to do and then the game outstays its welcome? Well, that kind of comes into the differentiation as well, because I find a lot that when I was playing games, it's like, right, I'm going to do this, and this is going to be my shtick. I'm going to go mad technology, or I'm going to go mad tea, or mad something. And I do it, and then I get to a point where I've already done it, and I can't really max it out much more. So now I've got to do other stuff. And then by the time I've done a little bit of that, it's like, well, now I need to do a little bit of this, because other players have already munchkined out whatever was there. And so by the end of the game, I discovered a lot that you just felt the same as everybody else. I had one game where I think in my first game, I tried to say, you know what, I'm going to get a ton of the flags. Because when you complete orders and when you complete, various technologies, you have the flag symbols, and you get the foreign agents, which I do think are a little bit powerful when they're used, but main thing is that when you can get those different flag icons, you get more points at the end. And I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to collect sets of those flags. I'm going to just go do a mix of those, get a lot of points for them, and see how that goes. That should be interesting and fun. Until you realise that by the end of the game, everybody has a decent mix of those, because they've done orders or they've done some techs along the way. So by the time you've actually got to the end, this idea of I'm different from you guys is completely shot out of the water. And I found that in that particular game, everybody just by doing whatever they were doing ended up with a bunch of flag icons anyway. So the point difference between the best and the worst was something like 4 measly points for all that focus. It just didn't seem that great, as it seemed really anticlimactic. And so, I mean, some people might disagree in that sense, but personally, I just felt that I was going through the motions, making good decisions, and certainly having a lot of options on a turn, but then just not feeling very different, just not feeling like I was doing my own thing. It's like, yeah, I'm just grabbing points here, I'll grab points over there. Where are we doing this again? Yoka what? By the time you finish this game, you've probably even forgotten the game is called Yokohama, because you don't really feel like you're doing much with regards to Yokohama in this. It's just, I don't know, it's a weird one with me. So, with regards to Yokohama, I would still play it. I don't think it's bad at all. I think it's generally a well-designed game. It's relatively easy to play once you've taught it and got used to it, because there's a lot of little fiddly rules that it's got to teach. But generally, especially the deluxe version, looks pretty striking on the table. I wish the artwork was a bit better, and I certainly wish the retail version was a bit closer in terms of quality to the deluxe, but oh well, that's what you get for backing a Kickstarter, I guess. Deluxe exclusives and stuff. I do hope that they put the deluxe on for sale as well as this version, so that you can get it if you do, because seriously, it's a massive upgrade. But generally, the game is fine. But I would only really want to play it with 2 or 3 players now. And even then, I would just rather play a more thematic Euro that takes less time, because this one does drag out a bit, and I think it just drags out beyond the point where I'm willing to play a fairly dry point salad with minimal interaction. But I still enjoyed the plays I had of it. I just wanted more. I just expected better, and just kind of got done with it quite quickly, actually. If I never play this again, I'll be perfectly content. I'm kind of done with it now. There's nothing much more it can really offer me, because even though there's a lot of different ways to get points, you're going to use them up, and once you've done that, there's not much else on offer. It's just a case of see what the location tiles look like each game, which, to be fair, to its credit, it's a decent amount of variety and setup. So Yokohama is still decent enough. I just have some better Euros that I can think of that I would rather play. It's okay, I don't mind it, but I don't think it's not going to stay on my shelf. And like I say, I can recommend it to those who like fairly meaty-ish Euros, who don't mind the time length, who don't mind the lack of theme, and just want to have a point salad Euro experience. This will probably go down quite well with you. So Yokohama, for me, gets an okay, not great, not bad, 6 green tea leaves. It's decent enough, and if push to shove, I will play it, but it's not one that I'm going to seek out anytime soon. And like I say, I can recommend it to some Euro gamers, but for me, just came up a little bit short. I'd much rather play the release before this one that I reviewed, which was Colosseum, and I'd sooner rather play that. I think I gave that an 8. Certainly, I would, definitely put out Colosseum before this one, even though it's it's a light to mid Euro, whereas this is a mid to heavy Euro. But yeah, just like I say, Yokohama, fine, just probably not for me. Take it or leave it. But 6 for me. I think it's okay, but yeah, it's meh for me. So that's it for me. I'm going to leave the regions of Yokohama and get on with the rest of my evening. I guess I got other stuff to do. So take care, enjoy your game, whether it's this or anything else. Just remember, no matter how long it takes, it's only a game.